The diplomatic shuttle, a needle of polished titanium and composite ceramic, sliced through the violet nebula that cradled the Verilian home system. Outside the reinforced viewports, ribbons of ionized gas shimmered in hues of amethyst and bruised gold, casting long, wavering shadows across the cabin interior. The silence of space was heavy, broken only by the low thrum of the sublight engines and the nervous tapping of Ambassador Sterling's finger against his armrest. Elias Thorne sat opposite the ambassador, watching the starscape bleed past. He looked tired. It was a permanent kind of exhaustion, the sort that settled into the marrow and refused to be slept away. At 32, he had the eyes of a man twice his age, dark and watchful, framed by lines etched by too much time staring at tactical displays and casualty lists. He adjusted the cuff of his dress uniform, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar against his skin. He was a cultural liaison, an academic title for a job that mostly involved telling powerful people which fork to use and which words would accidentally declare war. Ambassador Sterling cleared his throat, the sound loud in the pressurized cabin. "Elias," the older man said, his voice tight. "Do remind me again of the third principle of the Verelian greeting protocol. I feel like I am forgetting the hand placement." Elias did not look away from the window. Palms open, facing up, no sudden movements. "And for the love of Earth, Sterling, do not touch the crystalline protrusions on their shoulders. It is considered an intimate proposition." Sterling paled, wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "Right, palms up, no touching. Good Lord, why did they send us? They could have sent an AI. An AI does not sweat." "They sent us because the Verelians value biology," Elias said, finally turning his gaze to the ambassador. "They do not trust anything that cannot bleed. You know the briefing. We are here to show them we are not just machines of war. Try not to embarrass humanity in the first 10 minutes, all right?" "I am the ambassador," Sterling huffed, straightening his sash. "I do not embarrass humanity. I represent it." "Just keep your hands to yourself," Elias murmured, turning back to the void. The shuttle broke through the nebula's veil and Varel Prime hung before them. It was a world that defied industrial logic. From orbit, it did not look like a planet scarring with urban sprawl, but like a gem cut by a master jeweler. The capital city, Xylos, was not built upon the land. It grew from it. As they descended, the clouds parted to reveal a landscape that snatched the breath from Elias's lungs. He had read the reports, studied the xenobiology files, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The city was a forest of biocrystalline towers, soaring structures of translucent amber and jade that spiraled toward the upper atmosphere. They were not static stone and steel, they pulsed. Faint veins of light throbbed through the architecture, beating in time with a planetary rhythm Elias could not hear but could feel vibrating in his teeth. Bridges made of woven organic fibers connected the spires, swaying gently in the high-altitude winds. Below, phosphorescent gardens glowed in the twilight, vast networks of bioluminescent flora that lit the streets with a soft, dreamlike radiance. The sky itself seemed alive, teeming with gelatinous, airborne organisms that drifted like clouds, filtering the harsh radiation of the twin suns into a gentle, golden warmth. "It is excessive," Elias muttered, masking his awe with dry skepticism. "It is magnificent," Sterling whispered, pressing his face to the glass like a child. "It is a petri dish," Elias corrected, though his hand rested on the glass, his fingers trembling slightly. "A very expensive, very beautiful petri dish." The shuttle docked at a spire that bloomed open to receive them, the petals of the docking bay retracting with a wet, organic sound that made Elias's stomach turn. They were ushered into a decontamination chamber that smelled not of antiseptic, but of ozone and crushed mint. Their first hour was a whirlwind of sensory overload. Elias stood in a waiting chamber, watching a holographic projection flicker to life. A recorded voice, melodic and layered with harmonics, began the cultural orientation. The image showed a stylized Varelian figure bowing. "Welcome to the sovereignty," the voice intoned. "You stand on sacred soil. Observe the laws of the lattice. The queen is the heart. Her will is the pulse of the people. To defy the queen is to stop the heart. To serve the queen is to flow with the blood." Elias leaned against a wall that felt warm to the touch. Subtle. The hologram shifted, displaying two figures, one tall and regal, the other smaller, tethered by a glowing filament of light. "The bond of the companion is the highest honor. A chosen soul, bound to the monarch, surrenders autonomy for the protection of the throne. They are the shadow that walks in the light. They are property of the crown, yet master of the court." Elias frowned, watching the glowing tether pulse between the figures. "Property," he muttered to himself. "They really need to work on their translation software. That word is going to cause a diplomatic incident." "It is not a mistranslation," a voice said from the doorway. Elias turned. A Varelian protocol officer stood there, tall and slender, her skin a pale lavender that shimmered like mother of pearl. "The concept of the bound companion is ancient. It is total surrender. It is absolute trust. We do not expect humans to understand. Your species prefers transaction. We prefer freedom," Elias said, his voice level. "But I suppose that is just a cultural quirk." The officer's eyes, large and pupilless, narrowed slightly. "Come, the court awaits." The grand reception hall was a cavern of living crystal. The ceiling vaulted 500 feet overhead, supported by ribs of translucent bone that glowed with an internal fire. The air was thick with the scent of spices and ozone. Hundreds of Varelian nobles filled the space, a sea of iridescent skin and flowing robes made of silk spun from spider moths. They chattered in musical tones, their voices creating a hum that sounded like a choir warming up. Elias walked a step behind Sterling, keeping his posture rigid. He felt the eyes on him. To them, he was ugly, a flat-faced, dull-skinned creature wrapped in dead fibers. He could hear the whispers, the alien syllables clicking and humming. He caught words he had learned in his crash course: soft, fragile, short-lived. Then, the room went silent. It was not a gradual hush. It was an instant, absolute vacuum of sound. At the far end of the hall, the dais shifted. The floor itself rippled, rising up to form a throne of weaving vines and white crystal. Queen Lirashai entered. Elias had seen pictures. He had watched vids. They did not do her justice. She was tall, easily 7 feet, with a grace that made human movement look jerky and mechanical. Her skin was the color of moonlight on water, iridescent and shifting with every breath. Her hair was a cascade of bioluminescent filaments that floated around her head as if she were underwater, glowing with a soft white light. But it was her eyes that held him. They were enormous, spanning the width of her face, swirling with galaxies of indigo and violet. There were no whites, no pupils, just deep, endless wells of color. She wore a gown that was alive, a second skin of shifting moss and flowering vines that changed color as she moved, rippling from emerald to deep royal purple. She sat, and the movement was liquid. The entire court bowed, a wave of bodies dropping in unison. Sterling scrambled to bow, nearly tripping over his own sash. Elias bowed slowly, keeping his eyes on her. A breach of protocol he decided to risk. She saw him. Across the vast distance of the hall, Those galaxy eyes locked onto his. He felt a physical weight, a pressure in his chest like the drop of a high-speed elevator. Ambassador Sterling of the Human Coalition. Her voice rang out, not loud, but resonating from the walls themselves. You are welcome in our light. Sterling straightened, trembling. Your Majesty, we are humbled. We bring greetings from Earth and the colony worlds. We seek only peace and cooperation. Peace, she repeated. The word tasted strange in her mouth. A fragile thing, like glass, easy to break, hard to put back together. She stood up. The court gasped collectively. She descended the dais, the living steps molding to her bare feet. She walked past the bowing nobles, past the security guards in their chitinous armor, straight toward the human delegation. Sterling looked like he might faint. He opened his mouth to speak, but she ignored him. She stopped directly in front of Elias. Up close, she was overwhelming. The heat radiating from her was palpable, smelling of rain and electricity. She towered over him, but she leaned down, her face inches from his. He could see the intricate patterns of light shifting beneath her skin, a biological language he could not read. You are not the ambassador, she said. Her voice was lower now, a hum that vibrated in his collarbone. No, Elias said, holding his ground. I am Elias Thorne, cultural liaison. Liaison? She tested the word. The one who bridges the gap, the one who explains the unexplainable. She tilted her head, her glowing hair drifting closer to his cheek. Tell me, Elias Thorne, you have crossed the dark ocean to stand here. What do you fear most in space? The room was silent. Sterling was making a frantic hand signal that Elias ignored. Elias looked into those alien eyes. He thought of the war. He thought of the vacuum that had swallowed the Aegis, the ship his brother had served on. He thought of the cold, the silence, the absolute indifference of the universe. The silence, Elias said softly. It is not the dark that scares me, Your Majesty. It is the quiet. It reminds you that no one is listening, and that no one is coming. He paused, then added a sharp, wry smile. That, and the cafeteria food on the shuttle. It is truly terrifying. A ripple went through the court, a few gasps. He had mocked the journey. He had been sarcastic with the Queen. Lirashai stared at him. For a second, Elias thought he was about to be executed. Then, a faint amber glow ignited along her high cheekbone. It was warm, almost golden. The silence, she murmured. Yes, we fill our world with light and song to keep it away, but you carry it with you. She straightened, the amusement fading into something unreadable. You are interesting, human. Do not be boring. I execute boring people. She turned and swept away, her gown shifting to a vibrant, amused teal. The reception resumed, but the energy had changed. The air was thick with tension. Elias took a glass of some bubbling blue liquid from a passing server and retreated to the edge of the room. You are insane, Sterling hissed, appearing at his elbow. Cafeteria food? You cracked a joke about cafeteria food to a xenocidal monarch? She laughed, Elias said, taking a sip. It tasted like cinnamon and battery acid. Sort of. Her face glowed. That is a laugh, right? You are going to get us killed, Sterling moaned. Elias scanned the room. He was not looking at the dancers or the food. He was watching the shadows. Up in the ornate balconies that overlooked the hall, he saw figures huddled together. They were not looking at the Queen. They were looking at him. He saw a hand raise, a device flashing a burst of light too fast for the naked eye, a quantum burst transmission, illegal. We have friends here, Elias murmured, mostly to himself. And we definitely have enemies. What? Sterling asked. Nothing, Elias said. Just admire the architecture. Ambassador, try not to touch anything. The next day, the summons came. It was not a request. Elias was escorted by 2 royal guards, hulking warriors encased in bio-armor that looked like insect carapace, deep into the palace. The corridors were confusing, spiraling and shifting. At one point, a wall dissolved into a mist to let them pass, then solidified into rock behind them. The Queen requests a cultural exchange, one of the guards grunted. She wishes to understand human comfort requirements. She wants to know if I need a litter box, Elias muttered. They arrived at a set of massive pearl-like doors. They dilated open like the iris of an eye. Lirashai was waiting for him. She was not in her court regalia. She wore a simpler tunic of woven silver light, her arms bare, revealing the intricate bioluminescence tracing her muscles. Liaison, she said, turning from a window that overlooked the sprawling city. You survived the night. The bed tried to eat me, Elias said, walking into the room. It kept molding to my spine. It was very clingy. It is designed to support skeletal stress, she said, gesturing for him to follow. Come. I am told humans require sunlight and kinetic movement to maintain sanity. She led him on a tour that felt less like a diplomatic gesture and more like a test. She showed him the Hall of Ancestors, where the memories of past queens were stored in singing crystals. She showed him the hydroponic lungs of the palace, where massive rhythmic organs pumped oxygen through the walls. The palace is a body, she explained as they walked down a corridor that pulsed with a soft, pink light. It lives. It dies. It heals. If you cut the wall, it bleeds. Does it feel pain? Elias asked, running a hand over a smooth, warm surface. It feels everything, Lirashai said. As do I. I am linked to the central nervous system of the structure. I know where every guard stands. I know that your heart rate has accelerated by 10% since we entered this hallway. Elias pulled his hand back. That is intrusive. That is survival, she countered. They ended up on a high balcony, suspended thousands of feet above the city. The air was thin and sweet. Above them, the stars were beginning to emerge as the twin suns set, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. Lirashai leaned against the railing, which grew up to meet her elbows. My council believes you are a spy, she said casually. I am a cultural liaison, Elias said. My espionage skills are limited to reading bad poetry and knowing which spoon to use for soup. They say you are weak, she continued, ignoring his deflection. That humanity is soft. You break easily. You die quickly. They ask why we should make peace with a species that is essentially dust in the wind. We are persistent dust, Elias said. He looked out at the alien city. And we learn fast. She turned to him, her expression serious. The playfulness was gone. My people loved the war, Elias. It gave them purpose. It gave them unity. Peace. Peace is messy. Peace is boring. They blame me for ending it. They say I am betraying the legacy of the sovereignty. Heavy is the head, Elias said softly. Do not quote your terrestrial proverbs at me, she snapped, though there was no heat in it. I am alone in a room full of people who would worship me one moment and eat me the next if I showed weakness. Elias looked at her, really looked at her, behind the glowing skin and the galaxy eyes. He saw the same exhaustion he felt every time he looked in a mirror. My brother died in the Sector 7 skirmish, Elias said. The words came out before he could stop them. Lirashai went still. I know Sector 7. We lost 3 frigates there. He was on a medical transport, Elias said, his voice flat. He wasn't even fighting. The plasma torpedo didn't care. It just erased him. He gripped the railing. I don't hate you. I don't hate your people, but I hate the waste. I hate that he died for a line on a map that no one even remembers now. Lyrashai reached out, her long, glowing fingers hovering inches from his hand on the railing. She didn't touch him, but he felt the warmth of her hand, a magnetic pull. I am sorry for your loss, she said. It wasn't diplomatic boilerplate. Her voice dropped an octave, resonating with a strange, harmonic sadness. We do not forget the dead here. We eat their memories so they live on. Perhaps that is why we fight, so we have something to taste. The air between them grew heavy, charged with something that wasn't just politics. Elias looked up at her, and for a moment, the alien features didn't look so alien. They just looked lonely. You have a very dramatic queen aesthetic, you know, Elias said, his voice rough. The glowing, the floating hair, the brooding on balconies, it is very theatrical. Lyrashai let out a sound that was definitely a laugh, a chime-like musical sound. And you, Elias Thorne, use sarcasm as a deflection shield. It is a primitive defense mechanism, efficient but transparent. It keeps me sane, he said. Does it? She stepped closer. The scent of ozone and rain filled his head. Or does it just keep you alone? Before he could answer, the palace screamed. It was not a siren. It was a biological shriek, a low-frequency roar that vibrated the floor and shattered the glass in the nearby windows. Security breach, Lyrashai said. Her voice changed instantly. The warmth vanished. She was ice and diamond. What is it? Elias asked, looking around. Silence, she commanded. She stepped in front of him. As she did, her skin shifted. The iridescence hardened. Plates of chitinous black armor erupted from her pores, sliding over her arms and chest with a wet, clicking sound. In seconds, she was no longer a woman in a gown. She was a weapon of war. Stay behind me, she ordered. Her eyes were blazing white now. I can help, Elias said, reaching for the sidearm he wasn't allowed to carry. You will die, she stated. Do not be inconvenient. The doors to the balcony slammed shut, sealing them in. The walls pulsed red. Lyrashai stood ready, her hands glowing with concentrated bioelectricity. They waited, 1 minute, 2, then the red pulse faded. The shriek died down to a whimper. False alarm, a synthesized voice announced from the walls. System glitch in Sector 4, resetting. Lyrashai stood frozen for another moment, then let out a sharp breath. The armor retracted, sinking back into her skin, leaving her looking slightly pale. A glitch, she spat. My palace does not have glitches. Elias looked at the door. Through the translucent material, he saw a shadow move, just a flicker, a figure in a stealth suit, dissolving into the texture of the wall. That wasn't a glitch, Elias said quietly. No, Lyrashai said, turning to him. Her eyes were dark again. It was a test. Someone wanted to see how fast I would react, or, she looked at him, how I would react to protecting you. Me? You are the variable, Elias, she said. Come. You are going back to your quarters. And you are locking the door. That night, the guest suite felt less like a hotel and more like a cage. Elias paced the room. The walls were calm now, shifting in slow, soothing patterns of blue and green. But he couldn't shake the feeling of the floor vibrating under his feet during the alarm. He sat on the edge of the bed that annoyingly tried to hug his hips, and tapped his wristcom. He needed to report to Sterling. He needed to tell him about the shadow. His comm buzzed. A message. Incoming. It wasn't from Sterling. The encryption was scrambled, a chaotic mess of static that bypassed his standard filters. Text scrolled across the tiny holographic display. You are not safe here. The glitch was for you. You are the fuse. Elias stared at the words. The fuse, he whispered. The fuse for what? He tried to trace the signal, but it dissolved instantly, leaving his screen blank. He walked to the window. Outside, the city of Xylos was sleeping, if a city made of crystal ever truly slept. The lights were dimmer, pulsing in a slow, rhythmic heartbeat. Somewhere out there, someone was watching him. Somewhere in the deep, twisting gut of the palace, someone wanted the war to start again. He lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. He felt small. He felt incredibly far from Earth. As sleep dragged him under, the ceiling began to change. The bioluminescent bacteria and the architectural moss drifted and swirled. They weren't random patterns. They formed a shape, high above him. In the living darkness of the room, the lights coalesced into a silhouette. The high cheekbones, the floating hair, the twin suns of the eyes. It was Lirashai's face, formed from the very building itself, watching over him. It should have been terrifying. It should have been a nightmare. But as the face faded into the soft, rhythmic pulsing of the room, Elias didn't feel fear. He felt a strange, impossible sense of safety. The palace was watching, and for tonight, at least. The monster under the bed was on his side. The morning suns of Virel rose in a dissonance of color, one a pale, watery yellow and the other a bruised violet, casting long, conflicting shadows across the crystalline expanse of the capital. For Elias Thorne, the second day of his residency began not with grand diplomacy, but with a frantic summons to the lower diplomatic terrace. Ambassador Sterling was currently purple in the face, pressed against a shimmering wall of semi-organic quartz, while 3 Virelian delegates surrounded him, emitting a thick, verdant mist from the gills along their necks. "They are gassing us," Sterling wheezed, clutching a handkerchief to his nose. "Chemical warfare, get the respirators, I told you they were savages." Elias stepped between the ambassador and the confused delegates, raising his hands in the universal gesture for calm. He inhaled deeply. The mist smelled of crushed pine needles and warm honey. It was thick, clinging to the back of his throat, but it was not toxic. "Ambassador, put the handkerchief down," Elias said, his voice calm but authoritative. "They are not gassing you. They are saying hello." The lead delegate, a tall Virelian with skin the color of polished obsidian, clicked his mandibles in distress. "The human recoils," he chattered in broken standard. "We offer the scent of open waters. It is trust, biological honesty. We share our internal chemistry to show we hide no poison. It is a pheromone handshake. Sterling," Elias explained, gently pulling the ambassador away from the wall. "By refusing to inhale, you are essentially telling them you think they smell like liars." Sterling blinked, his face slowly returning to its normal pale hue. "Oh, I thought it was... Well, it looks like smoke." "It is friendship smoke," Elias deadpanned. He turned to the delegate and bowed low, inhaling ostentatiously. "We accept the open waters. Our respiratory systems are primitive." The ambassador was merely overwhelmed by the potency of your honesty. The delegate preened, the mist turning a lighter, happier shade of mint green. "The human is fragile, but polite." Later, in the high quiet of the Queen's private solar, Lirashai laughed. It was a sound that seemed to start in her chest and ripple outward, making the bioluminescent vines on the walls pulse in time with her mirth. "Chemical warfare," she repeated, shaking her head. Her hair floated around her in a halo of amused static. My delegates were terrified. They thought they had accidentally triggered a human allergic reaction that causes the head to turn purple. Sterling is specialized in trade tariffs, not xenobiology, Elias said, nursing a cup of something warm and viscous that Larashai had assured him was not alive. He sees a cloud. He thinks poison. He is a simple man. And you? Larashai asked, her eyes studying him over the rim of her own crystal cup. You inhaled. Did you trust it? I trusted the briefing, Elias said. And I figured if you wanted to kill us, you would use something more efficient than pine-scented fog. True, she mused, her smile fading into something more thoughtful. Efficiency is a virtue here, but trust is a currency we are currently short on. She stood, the movement fluid and sudden. Come. There is somewhere we must go. If you are to understand us, you cannot just smell our honesty. You must feel our history. She led him deep into the palace, past the bustling administrative sectors and down into the foundations where the architecture became ancient and dark. The living crystal here was not the bright, pulsing amber of the towers, but a deep, resonant indigo. The air grew cold, and the gravity plating in the floor began to lessen, making Elias's steps light and bouncy. They arrived at a circular aperture that sealed the corridor. Larashai placed her palm against it, and the door spiraled open, revealing a spherical chamber of immense size. There was no gravity inside. Elias drifted forward, his boots leaving the floor as he floated into the void. The chamber was vast, lit only by thousands of floating orbs. They ranged in size from marbles to boulders, drifting in slow, hypnotic currents. They glowed with soft, shifting colors, melancholy blues, angry crimsons, fearful grays. The Garden of Echoes, Larashai's voice floated to him. Though she had not spoken aloud, the acoustics of the room carried whispers like shouts. She drifted beside him, her gown billowing like a nebula. What are they? Elias asked, reaching out a hand but stopping short of touching a grapefruit-sized sphere that pulsed with a dull, aching thrum. Memories, she said. When a Varelian dies, we do not bury the body. The body returns to the fungal compost to feed the towers. But the mind, the final imprint of the soul, is captured in psionic crystal. These are the echoes of my people. She navigated the field of drifting souls with practiced ease, pushing off a large golden orb that radiated a sense of peace. A ruler cannot just govern the living, Elias. She must walk among the dead. I come here to remember the cost of my decisions. Elias stared at the galaxy of grief surrounding them. It was beautiful and terrifying. All of them? From the war? Many, she said. The red ones are violent deaths. The gray are fear. The blue are sorrow. Elias drifted deeper, mesmerized. He saw a cluster of jagged crimson shards floating near the center. Without thinking, drawn by a morbid curiosity he couldn't name, he drifted closer. He extended a finger. Elias, wait, Larashai warned, but it was too late. His fingertip brushed the surface of a jagged red crystal. The world vanished, screaming. The cockpit is screaming. The alarms are not sound. They are direct neural spikes of pain. The sky is spinning, a blur of black vacuum and burning metal. I can't feel my legs. The human fighter is behind me. I can see the tracer fire tearing through my wing. It hurts. The biolink is severed. My ship is dying, and I am dying with it. Mother. Queen. The cold is coming in. It is so cold. The fire, Elias gasped, jerking his hand back as if burned. The physical sensation of the memory slammed into him, the phantom pain in legs he still had, The freezing vacuum, the absolute primal terror of a creature alone in the dark. He spun in the zero gravity, losing his orientation. His breath hyperventilated in the quiet room. It wasn't just the alien pilot's fear he felt. The sensation tore the scab off his own wound. He saw the message on his datapad 5 years ago. Regret to inform you. Sector 7, missing in action. Presumed dead. He saw his brother's face. He felt the cold that must have taken him. Elias! Strong hands grabbed his shoulders. Lirashai had propelled herself to him, stopping his erratic spin. He was shaking, his teeth chattering. I felt him die. He was alone. He was so scared. Breathe, Lirashai commanded. Her voice was not the imperious tone of a queen, but the urgent whisper of a medic. You touched a raw trauma echo. It is too much for a human mind. Look at me. He couldn't focus. The terror was still racing through his blood, spiking his adrenaline. He was fighting a phantom battle. Lirashai pulled him closer. In the zero gravity, their bodies bumped together. She did not hesitate. She slid her hand from his shoulder down to his wrist, finding the pulse point where his heart hammered against the skin. She closed her eyes and hummed a low, resonant note. A sensation like cool water flowed from her fingers into his arm. It wasn't magic, it was biology. Elias felt his nerves stop firing. The panic, which had been a screaming siren in his head, was suddenly dampened, wrapped in a blanket of calm static. Her bioelectricity interfaced with his own nervous system, overriding the fight or flight response. His breathing slowed. The phantom cold receded, replaced by the warmth of her hand and the faint, sweet scent of ozone that clung to her skin. He opened his eyes. She was inches away, her galaxy eyes wide and filled with a concern that stripped away all her royal armor. Better? She whispered. You hacked my nervous system, Elias managed to say, his voice raspy. I grounded you, she corrected. She didn't let go of his wrist. Her thumb brushed the sensitive skin of his inner forearm, a touch that was clinical yet impossibly intimate. I felt your grief, Elias. It is heavy, like a gravity well. It wasn't just the pilot, he admitted, looking at the red crystal that drifted harmlessly nearby. It was my brother. That's how he died. In the dark. Alone. You are not alone now, she said. The words hung in the silence between them. For a moment, suspended in the dark among the glowing souls of the dead, the diplomatic barriers dissolved. She wasn't a queen and he wasn't a liaison. They were just two survivors floating in a graveyard. The connection humming through her hand on his wrist felt deeper than any conversation they had shared. It was a physical tether. Lirashai slowly released him, though her fingers lingered for a fraction of a second too long. Come, we should not stay. The dead are jealous of the living. The return to the surface was somber. The playful mood of the morning was gone, replaced by a quiet, shared gravity. But the palace did not allow for quiet contemplation. That afternoon, the High Council convened. Elias sat in the observation box, separated from the circular floor by a field of energy. The chamber was a theater of shouting. The humans are a contagion. Senator Vrax, a hardliner with an exoskeleton spiked with ceremonial iron, slammed his fist onto the podium. We open our trade routes, and they bring their instability. The mining strikes in the outer rim, human influence, the fluctuation in the credit market, human speculation. We need their grain shipments, Senator, a younger counselor argued weakly. We need nothing from them but their silence, Vrax roared, pointing a clawed finger toward the observation box where Elias sat. This liaison is a symbol of our weakness. He walks our halls, mocking our customs, destabilizing our youth with talk of democracy and individual rights. Look at the unrest in the lower city. It grows daily. Elias frowned. There had been minor protests, yes, but nothing linked to him. Vrax was manufacturing a narrative. As the debate raged, Elias's wristcom buzzed. He glanced down, shielding the screen with his cuff. Another scrambled message. She cannot protect you forever. Some want your blood to stain her throne. Leave while you can. Elias stared at the text. It was the second warning. The first he had dismissed as a prank. This one felt different. It felt like a countdown. He looked down at the council floor. Vrax was still shouting, but Elias's eyes drifted to the shadows beneath the balconies. He saw figures moving, not watching the speaker, but watching him. Sterling, Elias whispered to the ambassador, who was dozing in the chair next to him. We have a problem. Did you touch the shoulder spikes? Sterling mumbled, waking up. Worse, Elias said. I think I am becoming the villain of the week. The escalation happened faster than Elias predicted. 2 days later, a docking ring on the western spire suffered a catastrophic failure. A pressurized seal blew out during a routine maintenance cycle. 6 human technicians were sucked into the vacuum for 30 seconds before emergency fields snapped into place. They survived, but barely. Their lungs collapsed and skin frostbitten. The official report called it a structural fatigue, but rumors flew faster than facts. Elias was in his quarters, reviewing trade documents, when his door chime sounded. It wasn't the polite chime of a servant. It was the override code of palace security. The door slid open. Lirashai stood there. She was not alone. 4 royal guards flanked her, their weapons drawn and energized. Leave us, she commanded. The guards hesitated. Your Majesty, protocol dictates, leave us. Her voice cracked like a whip. The guards retreated, the door sealing behind them. Lirashai turned to Elias. She looked furious. Her skin was flushing a dark, violent violet, the color of a bruising storm. But beneath the anger, Elias saw something else in her posture, a rigid, brittle tension. Explain this, she said, throwing a data crystal onto his desk. Elias picked it up and slotted it into his reader. A holographic video sprang up. It was grainy, clearly recovered from a damaged sector. It showed a figure walking down the maintenance corridor of the western spire, minutes before the explosion. The figure wore a hooded cloak, but at the security checkpoint, they raised a hand. The system flashed. Access granted. ID, Elias Thorne. Clearance level, Diplomatic Alpha. The figure then accessed the pressure controls, keyed in a sequence, and walked away. Elias stared at the footage. That isn't me. It is your access code, Lirashai said, her voice low and dangerous. It is your biometric signature. It is a forgery, Elias said, standing up. I was in the archives all morning and checked the logs, asked the librarian. The archive logs have been corrupted, Lirashai said. She began to pace, circling him like a predator. Conveniently wiped by a virus that traces back to a human transmitter. So that is it? Elias asked, his own temper flaring. You think I blew up my own people? To what end? To start a war I have spent my entire life trying to avoid? I do not know what to think. Lirashai stopped, facing him. My counsel is baying for blood. Elias, Vrax has proof that you are a saboteur sent to destabilize the sovereignty from the inside. He is demanding your arrest. He is demanding your execution. And you believe him? Elias challenged. I believe in evidence. You believe in fear, Elias shot back. He stepped closer to her, ignoring the dangerous crackle of energy that seemed to radiate from her skin. You are scared that you made a mistake. You are scared that the humans are exactly what your nightmares told you we were. Do not presume to know my nightmares, she hissed. I know you don't trust me, Elias said, his voice dropping to a bitter whisper. I am just a pet to you, an interesting pet with a pass card. You keep me around to amuse the court. But the moment something breaks, I am the first one you look at. The words landed like a physical blow. Lirashai flinched. The violet anger in her skin flickered, revealing a paler, more vulnerable shade beneath. A pet, she repeated softly. She looked at him, really looked at him, her galaxy eyes swirling with a sudden, intense pain. Is that what you think? What else am I? Elias spread his hands. I am the token human. I chose you, she said. The confession hung in the air. Elias paused. What? I chose you, she said, her voice gaining strength. The coalition sent a list of 10 candidates, admirals, politicians, heroes. You were not on the list. You were in the rejected file. Too traumatized, it said. Too cynical. Unstable. She took a step toward him. I saw your name. I saw that you had lost a brother in Sector 7. I saw that you had resigned your commission because you refused to fire on a civilian transport. I saw a man who was broken by the same war that broke me. She was close now, so close he could feel the heat of her. I did not want a politician, Elias. I wanted someone who knew the cost. I pulled your file. I demanded you, not as a pet, as a hope. Elias stood frozen. The revelation rearranged everything he thought he knew about his assignment. She hadn't just accepted him. She had hunted for him. You watched me, he whispered. For years, she admitted. I needed to know that there was a human who felt pain the way I did. The anger in the room had shifted. It hadn't disappeared, but it had transmuted into something else, a high-voltage tension that was no longer about politics. It was personal. It was raw. Elias looked down at her. She was powerful, terrifying, and alien, yet in that moment, she was the most understandable thing in the universe. I didn't do it, Lirashai, he said softly. I didn't hurt those people. I know, she whispered. Her gaze dropped to his lips, then snapped back up to his eyes. The air between them hummed. It was the same magnetic pull as in the memory garden, but stronger, dangerous. She leaned in, just an inch. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt an insane impulse to bridge the gap, to kiss the woman who held his life in her hands. Lirashai's breath hitched. Her skin glowed with a soft, inviting pulse of amber. Then, she stepped back. The regal mask slammed back into place. She turned away, putting distance between them, breathing hard. But my belief is not enough, she said, her voice steady again, though he could hear the tremor in it. The evidence is damning. If I leave you here, Vrax's security teams will come for you tonight. They will not arrest you. They will kill you while resisting arrest. So what do we do? Elias asked, the loss of her proximity leaving him cold. I have to punish you, she said. She turned back to him, her face unreadable. Publicly. I have to look like I am taking action against the threat. She tapped her comms ear cuff. Captain, enter. The doors slid open. The guards marched in. Take the liaison, Lirashai commanded, her voice ringing with royal authority. He is to be placed under protective containment immediately. The dungeon, Your Majesty? The captain asked, eyeing Elias with malice. No, Lirashai said. The cells are compromised. He is a high-value asset and a flight risk. He requires maximum security. She paused, her eyes locking with Elias's. Take him to the royal suite, my personal quarters. The captain blinked. Your bedroom, Majesty? He will be locked in my inner sanctum where no one can reach him without going through me, Lairashai declared. I will personally oversee his interrogation and confinement. Move him. Elias let the guards grab his arms. He didn't struggle. He saw the play. She was arresting him to save him. As they marched him out into the corridor, he saw a group of counselors standing nearby. They watched the scene with smug satisfaction. Protective containment, one of them sneered. A fancy word for a cage. The queen is finally putting the animal on a leash. Elias was shoved forward down the long, glittering hallway toward the queen's private wing. In the shadows of a recessed alcove, a figure in a hooded robe watched them pass. He touched a concealed transmitter on his collar. Excellent, the conspirator whispered, his voice a dry rasp. The queen has taken the bait. The human is now exactly where we need him, in her room, under her guard, at the center of the target. When the blow lands, it will kill them both. The royal suite was not a room. It was a biosphere. Elias stood near the entrance, his boots sinking slightly into a floor that felt more like firm moss than carpet. The space was cavernous, the ceiling vaulted and translucent, revealing the swirling violet nebula above the Capitol as if there were no roof at all. Starlight filtered down through semi-organic glass, bathing the chamber in a cool, silvery luminescence. The walls were breathing. It was faint, a rhythmic expansion and contraction of the bioluminescent veins running through the quartz-like structure. But it was there. The room had a pulse, in the center, elevated on a dais of woven crystal roots, sat a bed. It was enormous, circular, and appeared to be grown rather than built, its fibers glowing with a soft, inviting amber light. The 4 royal guards who had escorted him bowed low, their chitinous armor clicking, and retreated backward out of the room. They did not look at Elias. He was no longer a diplomat to them. He was inventory. The heavy pearl-like doors slid shut with a wet sealing sound that signaled an airtight lock. Lairashai stood by a console that looked like a pedestal of floating water. She tapped the surface. A ripple of golden light shot through the walls, circling the entire room. A heavy mechanical thud echoed, a sound distinct from the organic noises of the palace. It was the sound of a deadlock, ancient and final. She turned to him. The playful, sarcastic woman from the balcony was gone. The weary ruler from the garden was gone. In their place stood the queen of the Varelian sovereignty, tall and terrifyingly composed. She looked Elias in the eye, her own gaze swirling with unreadable galaxies. "The door is locked," she said, her voice low and steady, vibrating in the still air. "You will stay in my room tonight, human." The words hung between them, heavy and absolute. Elias felt a cold spike of adrenaline punch through his exhaustion. He stiffened, his military training overriding his diplomatic veneer. He took a step back, his jaw tightening. "Excuse me," he said, his voice hard. "You heard me," Lairashai said, walking slowly toward the center of the room. Her gown shifted colors, bleeding from royal purple to a dark, warning crimson. "You are under my protection. That means you are under my roof, in my sight, at all times." "I am a diplomat," Elias snapped, the anger flaring hot and fast. "Not a prisoner, and definitely not a concubine. You cannot just lock me in your bedroom and expect me to be okay with it." "I expect you to survive," she countered, her voice sharpening. "Do you understand the political reality, Elias? The council has drafted a warrant for your arrest on charges of terrorism. If you step outside that door, The royal guard is obligated by law to hand you over to the inquisitors, and the inquisitors do not ask questions. They extract answers until the subject stops functioning. So this is asylum? Elias gestured around the opulent breathing room. It looks like a cage. It is a loophole. Lirashai stopped, her frustration cracking the regal mask. There is one ancient law that overrides the council's judicial authority. The law of the hearth. The monarch's personal property is inviolate. No guard, no counselor, no inquisitor can touch what belongs to the queen's household. Elias froze. He understood the implication instantly, and it made his stomach turn. Property, he spat the word out. You want to claim me as property? I want to claim you as a bound companion, Lirashai corrected. It is a legal designation. It makes you untouchable to them. It makes you mine. I am not yours, Elias growled. He walked toward her, ignoring the size difference, ignoring the lethal power she commanded. I spent 10 years in the Coalition Navy. I was a number, I was a rank, I was expendable asset 44 Alpha. I buried my brother because some admiral decided a transport ship was acceptable collateral damage. I swore I would never again be anyone's piece on a chessboard. He stopped inches from her. I will not be owned, Lirashai, not even to save my life. Lirashai held his gaze. The crimson in her gown faded, replaced by a soft, mournful blue. The bioluminescence on her skin dimmed, making her look less like a goddess and more like a woman standing in the dark. I am not the Admiralty, she said quietly, and you are not a number to me. She reached out, her hand hovering near his arm but not touching him. She respected the barrier he had thrown up. I am not asking for your submission, Elias, she whispered. I am asking for your patience. This is a shield, not a chain. In public, you must wear the title. You must let them believe you belong to me, but in this room. She looked around the vast, silent chamber, then back at him. Her eyes were impossibly sad. In this room, you are free. I will not touch you as a queen claiming, only as a woman asking. The vulnerability in her voice disarmed him. It was the same tone she had used in the memory garden, raw and stripped of pretense. Elias felt his anger drain away, leaving only the weary ache of the situation. And what does a bound companion actually do? Elias asked, crossing his arms. Besides not get arrested. Lirashai hesitated. She looked away, her glowing cheekbones darkening with a flush of indigo. Traditionally, they share the monarch's life. They share her burdens. And they share her bed. Elias raised an eyebrow. I see. I have never had one, she admitted suddenly. Elias blinked. What? I have never taken a companion, Lirashai said, her voice rushing slightly. The custom is archaic. It is usually a political arrangement, a noble form of hostage exchange. I hated it. I refused to partake. She looked at her hands. I have been queen for 60 years, Elias, and I have slept in this room alone for every single one of them. The admission stunned him. He looked at the alien monarch, beautiful, terrifying, ancient, and realized she was profoundly, achingly lonely. The power she wielded was a wall that kept everyone out. Everyone except, apparently, the one human she had dragged in to save from execution. 60 years is a long time to be alone, Elias said softly. It is an eternity, she murmured. Then she looked up, her gaze piercing. So you see, I have no interest in forcing you. I do not know how to be with someone. I am making this up as I go. Elias let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The tension in his shoulders dropped. Okay, he said. Okay. We play the part, but we need ground rules. Negotiation, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. How human. Clause 1, Elias said, holding up a finger. Mutual consent. Explicit. If anything physical happens, even a hand on a shoulder, it is because we both choose it in that moment. Not because of the title. Not because of the law. Lyra Shai nodded solemnly. Agreed. Your body is your own dominion. Clause 2, Elias continued. No mind hacks. No calming touches unless I ask for it. I need to feel my own fear. Agreed, she said. Clause 3, Elias said, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You stop looking at me like I am a tragedy you want to fix. Lyra Shai laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the heavy room. That one might be difficult. Elias, you are very tragic, but I will try. Good, Elias said. Then I accept the position. Temporarily. Excellent, Lyra Shai said, clapping her hands. The sound echoed like a bell. Then we must dress you. Elias frowned. Dress me? The wall to his left bloomed open. A swarm of small, floating drones buzzed into the room, carrying fabric that shimmered like liquid mercury. Behind them trotted two Verelian attendants, tailors, judging by the measuring lasers scanning Elias's body with ruthless efficiency. The bound companion has a specific aesthetic, Lyra Shai said, her eyes twinkling with suppressed mirth. It is symbolic. It represents openness. 10 minutes later, Elias stood in front of a reflective crystal panel, staring at himself in horror. The outfit was less of a uniform and more of a suggestion. It was made of a dark, silk-like material that clung to him like a second skin. The trousers were tight enough to be illegal in 3 human sectors. But the shirt, if one could call it that, was the problem. It was a deep V-neck that plunged all the way to his solar plexus, leaving his chest completely exposed. Woven through the fabric were thin, glowing threads of gold. I look like a neon stripper, Elias said flatly. You look dignified. Lyra Shai lied. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, a hand covering her mouth, her shoulders shaking. I am half naked, Lyra Shai. Elias gestured to his chest. This is not diplomatic attire, this is bedroom cosplay. The exposed heart represents vulnerability to the monarch, Lyra Shai explained, her voice trembling with laughter. And the threads. Look. She placed her hand over her own heart. The golden threads in Elias's tunic pulsed in perfect synchronization with her heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, Elias groaned. I am a walking mood ring. If you get excited, do I flash? If I get angry, you turn red, she noted. It is very practical. I hate this, Elias grumbled, tugging at the plunging neckline in a futile attempt to cover some skin. I am never leaving this room. That is the general idea, she said, finally letting the laughter escape. It was a warm, genuine sound that made the strange, alien room feel a little less cold. Night fell over the capital. The violet nebula outside darkened to a deep, inky black, speckled with the hard light of distant stars. The sleeping arrangements were the next hurdle. It is a bio-bed, Lyra Shai explained as Elias stared warily at the massive, glowing mattress. It scans the sleeper's physiology and adjusts density and temperature for optimal rest. And it is big enough for 2, Elias noted. Barely. It is the only bed, she said simply. I did not anticipate guests. They climbed in. Elias stayed rigidly on his side, wrapped in a sheet that felt like woven petals. Lyra Shai lay on the other side, her glowing hair spread out like a fan. They lay in silence for 5 minutes. Then, the bed moved. Slowly, imperceptibly at first. The mattress beneath Elias tilted. The material under Lyrashai dipped. Gravity took over, and Elias slid 6 inches toward her. He scooted back. The bed is tilting. It is trying to optimize thermal exchange, Lyrashai muttered, sounding embarrassed. Varelians sleep in communal piles for warmth. The bed thinks we are cold. I am not cold, Elias said. Tell it to stop. I cannot control its subconscious programming, she hissed. The bed gave a soft glorp sound and created a depression in the center. Both of them slid helplessly into the middle, colliding in a tangle of limbs. Elias's nose bumped against Lyrashai's shoulder. She smelled of rain and ozone. Get off, she laughed, pushing him away. I didn't move, Elias protested, scrambling back up the slope. Your furniture is trying to mate us. It is just confused. Lyrashai was giggling now, a girlish sound that seemed impossible coming from a creature of her power. Stop wiggling, you are confusing the sensors. They spent the next 20 minutes fighting the mattress, resetting the gravity, and eventually building a wall of pillows between them. By the time they settled down, the tension in the room had broken completely. They lay in the dark, separated by a barrier of soft foam, breathing in the quiet. Elias? Her voice came from the dark. Yeah? Thank you. For what? Being a pillow fort architect? For staying, she whispered. Even when the door was locked. Elias stared up at the ceiling, where the bioluminescence swirled in lazy patterns. I didn't have much choice. You always have a choice, she said. Good night, human. Good night, Your Majesty. He fell asleep to the sound of her breathing and the soft, rhythmic pulse of the room. He woke to the world ending. The alert was not a sound. It was a pressure wave. The room convulsed. The lights slammed from amber to a violent, strobing red. A siren shrieked, a high-pitched wail that tore at the eardrums. Breach! Lyrashai was moving before Elias could even process the noise. She rolled off the bed, landing in a crouch. Her skin was instantly ablaze with light. The bioarmor erupted from her pores, covering her chest and arms in black, jagged chitin. Get up, she screamed, grabbing Elias by the arm. Her grip was like iron. Elias stumbled out of bed, his heart hammering. What is it? Assassins, she snarled. They are in the inner corridor. They bypassed the DNA locks. The heavy pearl doors of the suite hissed. Someone was burning through them. Sparks showered the mossy floor. Get behind me, Lyrashai ordered, thrusting a hand forward. A barrier of shimmering energy materialized in front of them. I can fight, Elias yelled, looking for a weapon. Not against these, she said. Move! She dragged him toward the far wall. She placed her palm against a section of smooth crystal that looked solid. It split open with a wet tear, revealing a cramped, dark cavity, a panic room. Inside, she commanded, shoving him in. She followed him, sealing the wall behind them just as the main doors of the suite exploded inward. The panic room was tiny. It was barely a closet, designed for one person. Lyrashai pressed Elias against the back wall, her armored body shielding him completely. The space was pitch black, lit only by the faint, angry glow of her eyes and the bioluminescent veins on her neck. They were crushed together. Elias could feel the hardness of her armor against his chest, the frantic thrum of her hearts. She had two, he realized, beating against his ribs. Her breath came in sharp hisses against his neck. Quiet, she breathed, her lips brushing his ear. Do not move. Do not speak. Outside the thin wall, they heard heavy footsteps crunching on the crystal floor. Voices, distorted and synthesized, clicked in a combat language Elias didn't recognize. Search. The target is here. Kill the human. Secure the queen. Elias felt a cold sweat break out on his back. They were hunting him, in the dark, pressed against the alien queen. The reality of his situation crashed down. He was defenseless. He was a liability. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely audible. Lyra Shai stiffened. She turned her head slightly, her nose brushing his cheek. "Why? I'm the reason they are here," he whispered. "I'm the fuse. You are the spark," she corrected fiercely, her hand finding his in the dark and squeezing it hard enough to bruise. "And I will not let them snuff you out." "I am scared, Lyra Shai," he admitted. The confession slipped out, raw and honest. "Not of dying. I made peace with that years ago. I am scared. I am scared of how much I need you right now." Lyra Shai froze. The armor on her chest softened slightly, the chitin retracting just enough for him to feel the warmth of her skin beneath. "That makes two of us," she whispered back. "Your stubborn honesty. It terrifies me. Elias, everyone else tells me what I want to hear. You are the only one who sees me." A heavy thud against the false wall made them both flinch. The assassins had found the hollow space. A blade of pure energy pierced the wall inches from Lyra Shai's head. It glowed violet, sizzling as it melted the organic crystal. Lyra Shai didn't panic. She went deadly still. "They are in the membrane," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Big mistake." The wall peeled open. A figure stood there, a sleek, four-armed assassin wearing stealth gear, a plasma blade raised for the kill. Lyra Shai didn't use her energy blasts. She didn't use her armor. She closed her hand into a fist. "Contract," she commanded. The room itself obeyed. The living architecture of the suite, connected to her neural lace, reacted instantly. The floor and ceiling around the assassin surged like a closing mouth. Tendrils of crystal and muscle shot out of the walls, wrapping around the intruder's limbs. The assassin shrieked as the room swallowed him. The walls compressed, armor crunched, the plasma blade clattered to the floor. In seconds, the intruder was cocooned in a prison of hardening biomatter, immobilized and silenced. It was brutal. It was efficient. It was the power of a goddess in her own temple. Lyra Shai stood panting, her hand still clenched in a fist, her eyes blazing white. "Clear," she gasped. The adrenaline dump hit her a second later. The armor dissolved from her skin, retracting into her pores, leaving her shaking. Her knees buckled. Elias caught her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, taking her weight. She was heavy, solid, and trembling violently. "I have them," she said, her voice shaking. "Security is en route. The others are trapped in the corridor." "It's over," Elias said, pulling her close. "You got him. You are safe." I almost didn't." She looked at him, her eyes wide and wild. The galaxy swirls were chaotic, spinning fast. "If they had touched you." She didn't finish the sentence. She grabbed the lapels of his ridiculous open-chested tunic and pulled him down. The kiss wasn't like in the movies. It wasn't graceful. It was a collision. It was fueled by terror and relief and the raw, electric shock of surviving. Her lips were hot, tasting of ozone. Her hands tangled in his hair, desperate to anchor herself. Elias responded without thinking. He kissed her back, hard, pouring all the fear and the confusing, intense connection of the last few days into it. He felt the threads in his tunic pulsing wildly, syncing perfectly with the frantic rhythm of her hearts against his chest. For a long moment, there was no politics, no war, no different species. Just two terrified things clinging to each other in the dark. Then slowly, the logic returned. Lyra Shai pulled back. Her forehead rested against his. She was gasping for air. Her skin was flushed a deep, rosy pink, the color of affection. "Elias," she breathed. Elias kept his hands on her waist, but he didn't pull her back in. He steadied his breathing. "That was..." He started, his voice rough. Adrenaline, she whispered. Trauma. Fear. Is that all it was? He asked. She pulled back further, looking into his face. Her eyes were calming, the swirls slowing to a gentle drift. She reached up and touched his cheek, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. No, she admitted. But it cannot be this. Not now. Not while we are shaking. Elias nodded. He understood. If they did this now, it would be a reaction, a drug to numb the fear. They had made a deal. Consent. Choice. Not desperation. You are right, he said, though his body screamed to pull her back. Clause 1. We choose it. When we are ready. Lyra Shai stepped back, regaining a shred of her composure. She straightened her gown, though her hands were still trembling. The boundary stands, she said, her voice gaining strength. But the door is open a little wider now, I think. Yeah, Elias said, looking at the cocooned assassin and then back at the beautiful, lethal woman who had just saved his life. I think it is. Outside, the heavy boots of the royal guard thundered down the hallway. The danger had passed, but the real complication, the one beating in both their chests, had just begun. By the time the twin suns had climbed halfway up the violet sky the next morning, the news had saturated the palace like a spilled bottle of perfume. The queen had locked the human in her room, and he had stayed. For a society built on transparency and biological feedback, the concept of a closed door was titillating enough. But the idea of the celibate, untouchable Queen Lyra Shai taking a bound companion, and an alien one at that, sent the court into a frenzy of speculation. Elias saw the results of this cultural obsession over breakfast. He was sitting on the edge of the living bed, which was currently behaving itself, eating a piece of fruit that tasted like spiced pear. He tapped his wristcom to check the local subnet. You have got to be kidding me, Elias muttered. Lyra Shai emerged from her dressing sanctum. The battle armor was gone, replaced by a gown of flowing semi-translucent silk that shifted between pale blue and authoritative silver. What is it? She asked, fastening a collar of living platinum around her neck. Look, Elias said, projecting a hologram into the air between them. It was a caricature, a popular meme circulating among the younger courtiers. It depicted Lyra Shai in exaggerated regal glory, sitting on her throne, perched on her shoulder like a small fuzzy bird, was a tiny version of Elias. The tiny Elias was wearing a leash and eating a cracker. Lyra Shai stared at the image. The corner of her mouth twitched. They captured your nose perfectly. I am not a parakeet. Lyra Shai, Elias said, banishing the image with a swipe of his hand. This is humiliating. Half the court thinks I am a sex slave, and the other half thinks I am an exotic pet you picked up at a duty-free shop. Let them talk, Lyra Shai said, gliding over to him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. A deliberate, possessive gesture that felt different after the night in the panic room. Confusion is a tactical advantage. While they are busy giggling at holograms, they are not looking at what we are actually doing. We need to maintain the charade. Elias, can you handle being my pet? Elias looked up at her. The memory of her trembling in his arms in the dark was still fresh. I can handle the court. It is the assassins I am worried about. Then let us give them a show, she said, extending a hand. We have a promenade to walk, and while we walk, we hunt. They stepped out into the grand atrium, and the effect was instantaneous. Conversation died. Hundreds of eyes, faceted, glowing, pupilless, swiveled toward them. Elias played his part. He walked half a step behind her, head high, wearing the ridiculous chest-bearing tunic with the stoic dignity of a martyr, when they passed a group of whispering counselors. Lirashai leaned in close to him, her lips brushing his ear. To the onlookers, it looked like a moment of scandalous intimacy. "The fat one in the green robe," Lirashai whispered sensually. "That is Lord Vex. He funds the anti-human propaganda leaflets. Smile at him." Elias turned to Lord Vex and flashed a brilliant, predatory smile. The counselor recoiled as if slapped. "Nicely done," Lirashai purred, straightening up. "I think he is afraid you might bite." "I might," Elias murmured, offering her his arm as they descended the living stairs. "If he keeps looking at me like I am a biology experiment gone wrong." Under the cover of this public theater, they moved toward the archives. The palace was not just a building, it was a biological supercomputer, and its nervous system ran through the walls. Lirashai led him to a secluded alcove in the Hall of Records where the walls pulsed with a rhythmic, golden light. "This is a data vein," Lirashai explained. She pressed her hand against the warm surface. The wall bloomed open, revealing a complex web of glowing fibers that looked like arteries filled with liquid light. Every message, every transaction, every memory orb logged in the city flows through here. "It looks like a nervous system," Elias said, fascinated. He raised his wristcom, syncing his human pattern recognition software with the bioluminescent display. "Show me the traffic from the last 48 hours. Filter for encryption anomalies." The fibers flared. Data streamed across the wall, not in numbers but in colors and pulses. To a Varelian, it was a wash of emotion and intent. To Elias, it was chaos. But Elias had spent a decade breaking codes for the Coalition. He didn't look for meaning. He looked for the breaks in the pattern. There, Elias pointed to a dark, sluggish clot of data moving through a stream of bright blue signals. "What is that?" Lirashai frowned, leaning closer, the light from the wall reflected in her galaxy eyes. "That is the mourn stream. It is the channel used for funeral rites and grief processing. Families upload memories of the deceased to the central repository." "It is heavy," Elias noted. "Too heavy. Look at the density. Someone is piggybacking a secondary signal inside the grief data." He isolated the dark clot. His software stripped away the layers of digital sorrow. The poems, the crying faces, the eulogies underneath, hidden in the noise of 1,000 breaking hearts, was a tight, complex code. "It is a weapon schematic," Elias whispered, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "And a troop movement log. They are using the funeral network to coordinate." Lirashai's face hardened. "They are hiding their war in my people's pain. They know I would never censor the mourn stream. It is sacred." "It is brilliant," Elias admitted grimly. "And sick. We need to trace the source." "The signal originates from the lower city," Lirashai said, reading the pulses. "A memorial service for the victims of the Sector 7 conflict. It is happening now." "Then that is where we go," Elias said. "You cannot go there," Lirashai countered. "A human at a memorial for victims of humans? They would tear you apart. And the Queen cannot go either." Elias pointed out. "Your presence would turn a funeral into a parade. We need to be invisible." Lirashai looked at him, a mischievous glint returning to her eyes. "I can be invisible, and with enough biosculpting clay, so can you." An hour later, two figures slipped out of a service exit in the palace foundations. Elias was wearing a heavy hooded cloak that smelled of incense, his face obscured by a holographic distortion mask. Beside him walked a Varelian woman of average height, with dull, slate-gray skin and simple robes. Elias looked at the Queen. She had used a somatic shift, a rare ability of the royal bloodline to compress her height and dampen her natural bioluminescence. Yet, even in gray skin and rough cloth, she moved with a grace that screamed nobility. "You are terrible at being normal," Elias whispered as they merged into the crowded street. "You still walk like you own the pavement." "I do own the pavement," Lirashai whispered back, adjusting her hood. "It is technically crown property, and stop complaining. You make a very convincing pilgrim. You have the slouch of someone carrying a heavy burden." "It is called bad posture," Elias grumbled. "And I am carrying a heavy burden. I am carrying the knowledge that I am walking into a den of people who hate me." The memorial was held in a sunken amphitheater in the roots of the city. Thousands of Varelians stood in silence, holding glowing orbs of grief. The air was thick with the scent of crushed lilies and salt, the smell of Varelian sorrow. A low harmonic chant vibrated through the ground, a sound so deep it rattled Elias's teeth. They stood at the back. Elias watched as families drifted forward to place their orbs into a central well. The light from the orbs cast long, ghostly shadows against the cavern walls. "That one," Lirashai murmured, nodding toward a young mother placing a small, pale blue orb into the well. "Her son was a pilot. He died defending the border." "And that one?" Elias asked, nodding toward an old man weeping over a red orb. "His daughter," Lirashai said, her voice tight. "She was a diplomat, killed by a human radical on the colony frontier." Elias felt a lump in his throat. He had expected anger. He had expected a rally. But this was just loss. It was the same loss he had felt standing over his brother's empty casket. The grief wasn't alien. It was universally, brutally familiar. "We are doing this to them," Elias whispered. "My people. Your people. We are just grinding them down. And someone is using this," Lirashai said, her slate-gray hands clenching into fists. "Someone is taking this holy pain and stuffing it with orders to kill more sons and daughters." Elias pulled out a handheld scanner, concealing it in his sleeve. "I am picking up the signal. It is strong here. It is not coming from the well. It is coming from the temple node behind the dais." He nodded toward a small stone structure where a priest in crimson robes was blessing the orbs. The priest's movements were jerky, precise. "He is not blessing them," Elias realized. "He is scanning them. He is the upload point." They moved through the crowd, slipping into the shadows behind the pillars. They waited until the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, then followed the priest as he retreated into the tunnels beneath the amphitheater. The tunnels were narrow, lit only by patches of phosphorescent moss. The priest moved quickly, shedding his holy demeanor for the efficient stride of a soldier. Elias and Lirashai trailed him to a heavy blast door. The priest keyed in a code and slipped inside. "I can bypass the lock," Elias whispered, pulling a slicing tool from his belt. "But once we are in, there is no exit." "Open it," Lirashai commanded. The door slid open. They stepped into a control room that clashed violently with the sacred atmosphere above. Banks of servers hummed against the stone walls. Crates of weapons, human plasma rifles, and Varelian bio-grenades were stacked in the corner. The priest turned, startled. He reached for a weapon, but Lirashai was faster. She didn't need her royal height to be terrifying. She crossed the room in a blur, pinning the priest against a server rack with a forearm to his throat. "Speak," she ordered, her voice dropping the commoner accent and hitting the resonant frequency of the queen. "Or I will let the walls eat you." The priest's eyes went wide. "Majesty? Who is paying you?" Elias asked, stepping forward and picking up a plasma rifle. He checked the serial number. "This is Coalition Tech, stolen from a blockade runner. Who are you working with?" The priest sneered. though he was trembling. You think this is just about money. Human? It is about purity. The sovereignty is rotting. Peace is a disease. The name, Larashai pressed, tightening her grip. Her skin began to ripple, the gray disguise failing under the stress of her anger, revealing flashes of iridescent pearl beneath. The Syndicate, the priest gasped. The Red Hand, and the Pale Admiral. Elias froze. The Pale Admiral? That is a myth, a ghost story from the Human Intelligence Agency. He is real, the priest wheezed. He wants the war to restart. He says you know too much, Elias Thorne. That is why you have to die. Before Elias could ask more, a warning chime blared from the console. Proximity alert, Elias shouted. The blast door hissed. 3 figures in heavy combat armor, mercenaries, judging by the mix of human and alien gear, stepped into the doorway. Ambush! Lirashai shoved the priest away and grabbed Elias. They dove behind a stack of crates just as the room exploded in a storm of plasma fire and bioacid rounds. The servers sparked and shattered. We cannot fight them here, Elias yelled over the roar of the weapons. We are outgunned. The catacombs, Lirashai shouted back. There is a drainage vent behind the main console. Go! She stood up, her disguise fully melting away now, her natural bioluminescence flaring bright, blinding white to distract the shooters. She threw up a kinetic shield, absorbing a volley of fire. Elias scrambled for the vent, kicking the grate loose. Lirashai, move! She turned to follow him, but a mercenary with a heavy repeater caught her in the flank. A bolt of green plasma tore through her simple robes and seared the skin beneath. Lirashai gasped, stumbling. The shield faltered. No! Elias didn't think. He didn't calculate. He raised the stolen plasma rifle and fired a suppression burst, forcing the mercenaries to duck. He grabbed Lirashai's arm and hauled her into the narrow tunnel. Run! He screamed. They scrambled through the dark, damp catacombs. Behind them, the mercenaries were cutting through the grate. My leg, Lirashai gritted out. She was limping, her glowing blood leaving a trail of light on the stone floor. I am slowing you down. Leave me. Shut up, Elias snapped. I am not leaving you. We are equal partners, remember? They reached a junction. The tunnel ahead was unstable, shored up by old wooden beams. Elias looked at the beams, then back at the approaching lights of their pursuers. Cover your ears, Elias ordered. He pulled a sonic emitter from his utility belt, a device meant for scanning structural integrity, and jammed it into the crack of the main support beam. He overloaded the battery. Fire in the hole! He tackled Lirashai, covering her body with his own as the emitter shrieked. The beam shattered. The ceiling of the tunnel collapsed with a thunderous roar, dropping tons of rock and earth between them and the mercenaries. Dust choked the air. Silence followed, save for the sound of falling pebbles. Elias coughed, waving the dust away. Lirashai, you okay? Beneath him, the queen groaned. You dropped a mountain on us. I dropped a mountain on them, Elias corrected, rolling off her. We are just decidedly dusty. He helped her up. She hissed in pain, clutching her side. The plasma burn was ugly, cauterized but deep, glowing with a feverish heat. We need to get you back, Elias said, his voice gentle now. The secret way. The return to the royal suite was a blur of pain and stealth when the doors finally sealed behind them, shutting out the world. Lirashai collapsed onto the edge of the biobed. I will call the physicians, Elias said, reaching for the comms. No. Lirashai stopped him. No physicians. If the court sees I am wounded, they will smell blood. Vrax will use it to declare me unfit. No one can know. You have a hole in your side. Lirashai. Elias argued. Then you fix it, she said, looking at him with fever-bright eyes. You are a soldier. You know field medicine. Elias hesitated, then nodded. He went to the medical fabricator in the wall and retrieved a canister of biogel and a dermal knitter. He knelt beside the bed. Lirashai had pulled the torn robes away from her wound. The skin of her flank was smooth and iridescent, marred by the angry, charred furrow of the plasma burn. This is going to sting, Elias warned, his voice soft. Do it, she whispered. He applied the gel. It was viscous and cool, smelling of mint and antiseptics. As his fingers touched her bare skin, Lirashai shivered. It wasn't from pain. The armor she wore around her heart, the emotional distance she kept from the world, was gone. She was literally and metaphorically exposed. Elias worked with focused, gentle hands. He cleaned the wound, applied the knitter, and smoothed the regenerative gel over the area. His fingers lingered on her skin, feeling the strange, humming warmth of her biology. You have scars, Elias said quietly, noticing faint silvery lines tracing her ribs. From the coronation, she murmured, her breathing shallow. The symbiotic crowning ceremony, it bites. She looked down at him. And you? You have scars too. Plenty, Elias said. Most of them are on the inside, but I have a piece of shrapnel in my shoulder that sets off airport metal detectors. He looked up. Their faces were inches apart. The danger of the chase had faded, replaced by a thick, suffocating intimacy. The room seemed to shrink. The only sound was their synchronized breathing and the soft thump-thump of the golden threads in his tunic, which he was still wearing. Lirashai's eyes were wide, swirling with a mixture of pain and longing. I was terrified, she confessed softly. In the tunnel. I thought I would die in the dark, just like your brother. I wouldn't have let that happen, Elias vowed. His hand rested on her uninjured hip, his thumb brushing the curve of her waist. I know, she whispered. You stayed. She leaned in. Elias leaned in. The air between them crackled. It would be so easy. To close the gap, to let the adrenaline and the fear transform into passion. Her fingers curled into the bedding. His hand tightened on her waist. They were on the precipice. Then, Lirashai moved. She didn't pull away. She reached out and placed her hand over his heart, right over the exposed skin of his chest. Her palm was cool, her fingers strong. She pressed gently, grounding him. Elias, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Not like this. Elias froze. He looked at her, blinking the haze of desire away. We are bleeding, she said softly. We are scared. If we do this now, it is just another way to run away. She was right. He knew she was right. It would be a trauma bond, a frantic need to prove they were alive. Elias let out a long, shaky breath. He covered her hand with his own, pressing it tighter to his chest so she could feel the racing of his heart. You are right, he said. Clause 1. We choose it freely, not because we are hurting. Lirashai smiled, a sad, sweet expression that broke his heart a little. You are a good man, Elias Thorne, a frustratingly good man. And you are a stubborn woman, Lirashai, he retorted, gently moving her hand away and standing up. Now, rest. I have some data to analyze. He retreated to the console, putting physical distance between them to let the air cool. He plugged in the drive he had pulled from the priest's server before the explosion. Lirashai watched him from the bed, pulling the sheet up to cover her wound. Elias worked in silence for 10 minutes, the holographic code scrolling across his eyes. Then, he stopped. Lirashai, he said, his voice turning cold. You need to see this. She sat up, wincing. What is it? The master plan, Elias said, turning to face her. The signals in the grief orbs, they are not just coordinating troops. They are an activation code. Activation for what? For the Interstellar Summit next week, Elias said. They are going to trigger a biotechnical cascade. It is designed to target the Varelian life support systems on the station. Lirashai went pale. The summit is on a living station. If the life support fails, it will kill everyone, Elias finished. But that is not the worst part. The code. It is designed to leave a digital fingerprint, a human fingerprint. He looked at the Queen. They are going to make it look like we released a plague. They are going to frame humanity for the assassination of the entire Galactic Council. Lirashai stood up, ignoring her pain. The Queen was back. Then we have to stop them, she said, her eyes burning with cold fire. We have to go to the summit. It is a trap, Elias warned. I know, Lirashai said. But it is the only way to clear your name, and mine. She looked at the locked door. Get your things. Elias, we are going to a party. The orbital station Unity was a monstrosity of hope, a colossal structure suspended in the neutral zone between the human coalition and the Varelian sovereignty. It was not built. It was grown. A skeleton of titanium alloy had been seeded with Varelian architectural coral, resulting in a station where steel bulkheads bled into walls of living, breathing quartz. It hung in the void like a glittering, half-organic jewel, a testament to what the two species could achieve if they stopped shooting at each other. Inside the royal shuttle, the atmosphere was less majestic and more domestic. You brought 4 dress tunics, Lirashai noted, watching Elias struggle to close his travel case. We are here for 3 days, Elias. Unless you plan to spill wine on yourself every 4 hours. This is excessive. I am the cultural liaison, Elias grunted, forcing the latch shut. I have to be prepared for every diplomatic contingency. Morning tea, beige tunic, afternoon negotiation, navy tunic, evening assassination attempt, dark gray, to hide the bloodstains. Lirashai laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in the last week. She was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the high, bioluminescent collar of her ceremonial armor. She bared her teeth at her reflection, practicing a snarl. You are doing the face again, Elias noted, sitting on his suitcase. The intimidating monarch face, Lirashai corrected, smoothing her expression back to icy neutrality. I must look like I am capable of devouring their souls. The counselors smell weakness like sharks smell blood. You look terrifying, Elias assured her. He stood up and walked over to her, fixing a stray lock of her glowing hair. But you also look tired. Remember, if Vrax starts monologuing, just tap your ear 3 times. I will spill a drink and cause a distraction. My hero, she murmured, leaning into his touch for a fleeting second before the shuttle docking clamps engaged with a heavy thud. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the lion's den. The grand concourse of the station was a glittering ballroom suspended over a minefield. Thousands of delegates mingled under a transparent dome that offered a panoramic view of the local star cluster. The air smelled of recycled ozone and the heavy, orchid-like perfume the Varelians used to mask anxiety. Elias walked at Lirashai's side, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. A breach of protocol for a servant, but mandatory for a bound companion. They moved through the crowd as a single unit, a display of solidarity that drew whispers and stares. Human aid at 3 o'clock, Lirashai whispered, her lips barely moving. He is sweating profusely. He knows something. Elias glanced to the right. A young coalition aide was indeed wiping his forehead, his eyes darting around nervously. "That is Chen," Elias murmured back, leaning in as if to kiss her cheek. "He is one of ours, the best pattern analyst in the fleet. He looks nervous because he is standing next to a Varelian engineer who is 7 feet tall." They approached the pair. The Varelian engineer, a towering female with exoskeleton plating polished to a mirror shine, was looking down at Chen with disdain. "Your data architecture is primitive," the engineer, Xylas, was clicking. "It is like trying to run a starship on a potato." "It is robust," Chen squeaked, adjusting his glasses. "It has redundancies, unlike your biogloop which gets a cold every time someone sneezes." "Couple trouble?" Elias interrupted smoothly. Chen jumped. "Liaison Thorn, and, Your Majesty." He bowed so low he nearly headbutted the floor. "Report," Elias said, keeping his tone conversational while he casually adjusted the collar of Lyrashai's gown. To the room, it looked like a lover's gesture. To Chen, it was a signal to talk. "The signal traffic is spiking," Chen whispered, looking at his datapad. "I am seeing ghost packets everywhere. Someone is flooding the station's local mesh with junk data to hide a carrier wave. The carrier wave is targeting the biofiltration systems," Xylas added, her mandibles clicking in agitation. "I tracked it to the primary lung. Something is wrong with the station's breath. It tastes metallic." "Stay on it," Lyrashai ordered softly. She placed a hand on Elias's chest, laughing as if he had told a joke. "If the biosystems fail, this station becomes a tomb. Xylas, monitor the lung. Chen, trace the source. We will keep the council distracted." The summit began with the unity ritual. The human High Admiral and the Varelian Prime Counselor stood on a central dais, placing their hands on a glowing orb of peace. It was meant to be a moment of solemn hope. It became a nightmare. As the Admiral began his speech, the lights in the Grand Concourse flickered. The soft, ambient amber of the living walls suddenly spasmed. A vein of light running through the ceiling turned a violent, bruised purple. Then, the station screamed. It was a low, subsonic moan of structural agony. The floor buckled. "Look!" someone shouted. On the far wall, a crimson lesion bloomed. It spread like ink in water, necrotic and fast. The living quartz blackened and flaked away, oozing a dark, foul-smelling ichor. "Contagion!" a Varelian guard roared. "Biological attack!" The holographic screens around the room flared to life, but instead of the summit agenda, they showed swarms of data, red, angry code eating through the station's immune system. "It is human code!" Senator Vrax shouted, pointing a claw at the screens. "Look at the syntax. It is a viral bomb." Panic detonated. Varelian guards drew their weapons. Their bioarmor spiking, human security teams raised their rifles. The peace evaporated in seconds, replaced by the instinct to kill. "Hold fire!" Lyrashai's voice boomed across the chaos, amplified by her suit. "This is a manipulation. Look at the pattern." But no one was listening. The station was dying around them. The crimson rot was spreading, eating the air scrubbers. Alarms blared, warning of oxygen toxicity. "Seize them," Vrax ordered, pointing at the human delegation. "Seize the saboteurs." "Protective formation," the human admiral shouted. In the center of the madness, Lyrashai grabbed Elias. "We need to get to the council chamber. If they start shooting, the war begins now." They fought their way through the panicking crowd. The corridors were warping, the floor tilting as the station's gyroscope contracted a fever. They burst into the council chamber, a secure bunker where the leaders were being ushered. The room was already a tribunal. Vrax stood at the head of the table, flanked by 4 hardline generals. A massive holographic display dominated the center of the room. "There is no need for investigation," Vrax sneered as Lyrashai entered. "We have the evidence." He tapped the console. A video began to play. It was grainy security footage from the Queen's private suite. It showed Elias sitting at the console in her room, the moment from the previous night when he had analyzed the data. But the screen he was looking at in the video didn't show the conspiracy. It showed the viral code. The footage showed Elias typing rapidly, initiating the upload. It showed him smiling a cold, satisfied smile as the upload completed. It was a deep fake, a perfect, damning fabrication. "He did it from your own room, Majesty," Vrax said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "He used your clearance. He used your trust. The human is the carrier." The human admiral looked at Elias with betrayal in his eyes. "Thorn, is this true?" "It is a lie," Elias said, stepping forward. "Look at the timestamp. I was decoding the signal, not sending it." "Silence!" Vrax roared. He turned to Lyrashai. "Majesty, you have been compromised. This pet of yours has poisoned our station. He has doomed us all. To prove your loyalty to the sovereignty, you must denounce him. You must execute the traitor yourself." The room went silent. A dozen weapons were trained on Elias. Lyrashai looked at the screen. She looked at Vrax. Then she looked at Elias. He saw the fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for him. She was the queen. She could save herself. All she had to do was give him up. It was the logical political move. It was what a ruler should do. Elias braced himself. He nodded slightly, giving her permission. "Do it. Survive." Lyrashai drew herself up to her full height. Her bioluminescence flared, blindingly bright, turning her skin into living starlight. "You ask me to denounce him," she said, her voice calm and terrible. "I ask you to do your duty," Vrax said. "My duty is to the truth," Lyrashai declared. She stepped between Elias and the guards. "And the truth is that this man is not my prisoner. He is not my pet. He is my partner." Gasps rippled through the room. "I invited him into my room," Lyrashai continued, her voice rising. "I gave him access to my codes. I gave him access to my life. If he is guilty, then I am guilty. If he is a traitor, then I am a traitor. Because there is no door between us anymore. We are one entity." She looked Vrax dead in the eye. "If you want to shoot him, Vrax, you will have to shoot your queen first. And I promise you, the station will scream when I die." Vrax hesitated. His finger hovered over the trigger of his sidearm. But he could not do it. He could not kill the monarch in front of the entire council. "House arrest," Vrax spat, holstering his weapon. "Confine them to the observation deck until the station dies. Let them watch their handiwork." The guards roughly escorted them out. The observation deck was a bubble of glass at the apex of the station. It was quiet here, far from the screaming crowds and the spreading rot. Below them, the station was a chaotic swirl of flashing lights and darkening patches of necrosis. The door sealed behind them. They were alone. Elias walked to the window, leaning his forehead against the cold glass. He was shaking. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered. "Done what?" Lyrashai asked, standing behind him. "You tied yourself to a sinking ship," Elias said. "You could have walked away. You could have blamed me and lived to fight another day." "I am tired of fighting alone," she said. Elias turned around. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. "Do you realize what you said in there? You told them we are one entity. You told them." "I told them the truth," Lyrashai said. She took a step toward him. "Why does that terrify you more than the execution squad?" "Because I am a fraud," Elias shouted, the confession tearing out of him. He paced away, running his hands through his hair. I am not a hero, Lyra Shy. I am a coward. I resigned my commission because I couldn't handle the guilt. I took this job because I thought it would be safe. I keep people away because every time I love someone, they die. My brother, my parents, my squad. He stopped, his back to her, his shoulders heaving. If I let you in, if I really let you in, the universe will take you away. That is how it works. I am cursed. You are not cursed, Lyra Shy said softly. You are hurt. She walked around him so he had to look at her. And what about me, Elias? Do you think I am fearless? I look at that mirror every day and I wonder if anyone can see the woman behind the light show. I wonder if I am just a biological function, a reproductive vessel for the monarchy, a weapon for the state. She took his hand and placed it on her cheek. You are the first person in 60 years who looked at me and saw Lyra Shy, not the queen, just me. If that is a curse, then I want to be cursed. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the hum of the station and the beating of two hearts, one human, two Verelian. Elias looked at her. He saw the cracks in the perfection. He saw the fear, and he saw the fierce, unyielding loyalty that had made her stand between him and a firing squad. He stopped running. I am not going anywhere, Elias whispered. Good, she breathed. He reached out and touched the locking panel on the door. It turned red. Locked. This time, Elias said, his voice steady. I am locking the door because I want to stay. He turned back to her. The distance between them vanished. He kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss in the panic room. It wasn't frantic. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a question asked and answered in 1,000 small movements. It was the feeling of walls coming down, stone by stone. Lyra Shy made a sound low in her throat, a hum of pure contentment, and pulled him closer. Her skin felt warm against his, the bioluminescence shifting from the cool blue of royalty to a deep, golden amber of home. They moved to the seating platform by the window, sinking down into the cushions without breaking contact. There was no desperate tearing of clothes, no frantic grasping. It was a slow unraveling. It was Elias tracing the line of her spine, mapping the stars on her skin. It was Lyra Shy learning the roughness of his hands, the solid beat of his human heart. It was an intimacy of recognition. Here you are. I have been looking for you. As they lay together, limbs tangled, foreheads touching, something strange began to happen. The room, which had been flickering with the station's distress, began to stabilize. The angry red pulses in the walls slowed. The lights deepened to a calm, steady gold, the exact color of Lyra Shy's skin when she touched him. Elias, Lyra Shy whispered, pulling back slightly to look at the ceiling. Look. Elias looked up. The bioorganic veins in the ceiling were no longer spasming. They were glowing with a rhythmic, harmonious light. The station, Elias said, bewildered. It stopped screaming. It is responding to us, Lyra Shy realized, her eyes wide. The architecture, it is psychoreactive. It feeds on emotion. It feeds on the Queen's state of mind. And the Queen is... Elias paused, smiling. The Queen is at peace, she finished, smiling back. And connected. It is a feedback loop, Elias said, his analyst brain firing even in the afterglow. Your biology controls the station, but my biology is stabilizing yours. We are a circuit, a grounding wire. A bridge, Lyra Shy corrected. We really are a bridge. The realization hung in the air. Their union wasn't just a political statement or a romantic choice. It was biological compatibility. It was proof that their species were not opposites, but two halves of a potential whole. If we can stabilize this room, Elias said, sitting up, we can stabilize the station. And if we can stabilize the station, Lirashai added, sitting up beside him, her hair floating in a halo of renewed energy. We can prove the virus is a lie. The sun of the local system began to rise over the curve of the planet below, casting a blinding white light through the observation window. The virus is data, Elias said, his mind racing. It is a false signal telling the station it is sick. But the station has a nervous system, and you are the brain. I can override it, Lirashai said, but I need a direct link. I need to plug into the core, and Vrax has the core locked down. Vrax has the core, Elias agreed. But we have something he doesn't have. What? We have a microphone, Elias said, pointing to the emergency broadcast panel on the wall. And we have the truth. He stood up, offering his hand to the Queen. Ready to start a revolution, partner. Lirashai took his hand. Her grip was strong. Her eyes were galaxies on fire. I have been ready for 60 years, she said. Together, they unlocked the door. The observation deck became the command center for a revolution. Elias worked the console, his fingers flying across the haptic interface, while Lirashai stood in the center of the room, her eyes closed, her hands pressed against the living glass of the window. She was not looking at the stars. She was speaking to the station. She was projecting a command of absolute, overriding authority into the psycho-reactive architecture. Now, Elias said, hitting the final key sequence. The override slammed into the station's central nervous system. Throughout the colossal structure, in the panicked grand concourse, in the locked-down council chamber, in the docking bays where soldiers were preparing to breach airlocks, the walls changed. The opaque, biocrystalline surfaces that formed the station's skin suddenly unfurled. They became translucent, high-definition screens, turning every corridor and room into a massive theater. The chaos of the summit froze. Delegates, soldiers, and civilians looked up as the walls began to broadcast. They did not see a polished speech. They saw raw data. Overlays appeared, floating in the air like ghosts. They showed the code of the virus, dissected and stripped of its camouflage. They showed the encrypted communication logs between Senator Vrax, the Pale Admiral, and the shadowed financiers of the war machine. They showed the money trails, credits flowing from weapons manufacturers into private accounts on both sides of the border. And then, they saw Elias. His face appeared on the massive screens, magnified 1,000 times. He looked exhausted. His tunic was rumpled, his hair messy, his eyes dark with lack of sleep. He did not look like a mastermind terrorist. He looked like a man who had been pushed to the edge. My name is Elias Thorne. His voice echoed through the station, shaking slightly but gaining strength with every word. I am the cultural liaison to the sovereignty, and I am not your enemy. In the observation deck, Elias gripped the console, staring into the pickup sensor. You have been told that I attacked this station, Elias continued. You have been told that humanity wants to poison you. But look at the data on the walls. The poison was not made by me. It was made by people who profit when we bleed. They took your grief, the memories of your dead, the pain of your loss, and they turned it into a weapon to sell you another war. Beside him on the screen, Lirashai stepped into the frame. She did not wear her armor. She did not wear the crown. She stood in her simple gown, her bioluminescence glowing with a soft, steady gold. My people, Lirashai said. Her voice did not boom. It resonated, humming in the chest of every Varelian on the station. We have been ruled by fear for too long. We have let our scars dictate our future. Today, the enemy is not the human standing across from you. The enemy is the lie that says we can never be at peace. She looked at Elias, and for a moment, the entire galaxy watched them look at each other, not with hatred, not with suspicion, but with a profound, terrifying trust. We choose a different path, Larashai declared. We choose truth. For a heartbeat, the station was silent. The weapons lowered. The rage that had been engineered to a boiling point began to cool as the undeniable evidence scrolled across the living walls. Then, the floor lurched. It was not a subtle vibration. It was a violent heave that threw Elias against the console. The artificial gravity screamed and inverted. "They are collapsing the stabilizer field," Elias shouted, checking the readings. "The conspirators, they are panicking. If they cannot control the station, they are going to destroy it." On the screens, the external sensors showed the station drifting off its axis, tilting dangerously toward a micro-wormhole that acted as the system's waste disposal. The gravitational shear was already tearing at the outer docking rings. "The core," Larashai gasped, clutching the railing as the room tilted 45 degrees. "They have sabotaged the heart. We have to manually reset it." "That is 10 decks down," Elias yelled over the screaming alarms. "Through a station that is currently having a seizure." "Then we run," Larashai said, grabbing his hand. They burst out of the observation deck into a corridor that had become a nightmare. The gravity fluctuated wildly. One moment they were running on the floor, the next, they were slamming into the ceiling. The living walls were spasming, extruding rogue tendrils of biocable that whipped around like angry snakes. "Left!" Larashai shouted, pulling Elias hard to the side as a bulkhead buckled, spewing pressurized steam. They sprinted through the twisting architecture. Ahead, a squad of mercenary saboteurs blocked the lift access. They raised their weapons before they could fire. A massive shape dropped from the ventilation shaft above them. It was Xylas, the Varelian engineer, flanked by a squad of loyalist guards and a frantic-looking Chen holding a stun pistol with both hands. "Go!" Xylas roared, deploying her exoskeleton shields to block the mercenary fire. "We will hold the line. Save the damn station." "Don't die, Chen!" Elias shouted as they sprinted past the firefight. "I plan to complain about this extensively later," Chen screamed back, firing wildly. Elias and Larashai reached the central shaft. The lift was dead. The shaft was a kilometer-long drop into the glowing blue reactor core, and the gravity inside was churning like a blender. "We jump," Larashai said, looking down. "You can't be serious," Elias said. "Mun trust the station." She said, "Mun trust me." She pulled him over the edge. They fell, but they did not plummet. Larashai extended her hand, her biofield interacting with the station's ambient energy. She guided their descent, surfing the chaotic gravity waves. They spun through the air, dodging debris and sparks, locked together in a free-fall that felt like flying. They slammed onto the grating of the core control platform. The core was a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsing, spherical heart of pure biological light. But the heart was sick, a jagged metallic device, a splice of human black market tech and Varelian war relics, had been clamped onto the organic tissue. It was pumping a dissonant frequency into the station, forcing the drift toward the wormhole. "It is hardware," Elias said, running to the device. "I can't hack it. It is hardwired into the neural cortex." Larashai placed her hands on the fleshy surface of the core. She recoiled, crying out, "It is in pain," she gasped. "The interface is scrambled. I cannot command it. It does not recognize me. It needs a bridge." Elias realized. He looked at the device, then at the Queen. It is running a dual signal, human tech and Varelian biology. It needs a dual command to override it. He grabbed a set of interface cables from the human side of the splice. I have to plug in, and you have to plug in. We have to synchronize. Elias, Lirashai warned, her eyes wide. A neural sync at this level. There are no filters, no secrets. If we do this, we are not just sharing data, we are sharing souls. The station groaned, the metal screeching as the wormhole's gravity tore at the hull. The door is already open. Lirashai, Elias said. Let's kick it off the hinges. She nodded. She took the organic tendrils of the core in her hands. Elias jammed the interface jacks into the ports at his temples. They looked at each other one last time. Together, she whispered. They closed their eyes. The world dissolved. There was no station, no wormhole, no pain. There was only a blinding white ocean of consciousness. Elias gasped as he was pulled out of his own body and into hers. He was a child. He was standing in a cold crystal hall. Tutors with faces like stone were looming over him. Do not cry, they commanded. A queen does not cry. A queen is a fortress. He felt the crushing weight of the crown, a physical pressure on his skull. He felt the loneliness, a cold, hollow ache that spanned decades. He sat on a throne in an empty room, surrounded by millions of people, yet completely, utterly alone. Lirashai gasped as she was pulled into him. She was standing in the rain on a colony world. She was holding a letter. Regret to inform you. She felt the ground drop out from under her. She felt the brother she loved, the one who laughed loud and protected her, vanish into the dark. She felt the survivor's guilt, a black tar coating her lungs. She felt the cynical armor she built, brick by brick, to keep anyone else from getting close enough to die. The memories swirled and collided. They were not watching a movie, they were living it. Elias felt her coronation. He felt the terrifying moment she first saw him and thought, he looks as broken as I am. Lirashai felt his fear in the panic room. She felt the moment he looked at her on the balcony and thought, she is the most beautiful, lonely thing in the universe. Then, the shadows came. The dissonance of the sabotage device tried to tear them apart. It manifested as dark, twisted whispers in their shared mind. Control her, the shadow whispered to Elias. She is a weapon. Use her. Dominate her. Crush him, the shadow whispered to Lirashai. He is weak. He is a threat. Erase him. It was the instinct of their species' history. Conquer or be conquered. Kill or be killed. In the white ocean, their avatars faced each other. The shadows clawed at them, trying to force them into the old patterns of war. Elias looked at Lirashai. He saw the power she held. He saw the potential for destruction, and he chose. I surrender. His thought echoed through the lattice, not to your power, to you. Lirashai looked at Elias. She saw his vulnerability. She saw the potential for betrayal, and she chose. I yield. Her thought echoed back, not to your demand, to your heart. They reached out. They clasped hands in the psychic storm. It was not a fusion of dominance. It was a fusion of choice. It was two terrified, damaged beings deciding that they were stronger together than they were apart. The connection snapped into place. It was a golden, blinding flash of absolute unity. In the physical world, the core exploded with light. The jagged sabotage device sparked and melted, unable to process the harmonic resonance of the dual signal. The station's living tissue, flooded with the endorphins of the synchronization, healed instantly. The lurching stopped, the gravity stabilized, the wormhole receded as the station's thrusters fired in perfect, graceful unison. On the screens throughout the station, The final data packet was decrypted. It was a recording of the Pale Admiral giving the order to detonate the core. It was undeniable proof. In the core chamber, Elias and Lyrashai collapsed, the cables detaching from their temples. They lay on the grating, gasping for air, their limbs tangled. They were sweating, shaking, and utterly exhausted. Elias opened his eyes. He looked at Lyrashai. It felt strange to look at her with physical eyes after seeing the world through her soul. "I saw," he whispered. "I saw your childhood, the tutors. I saw your brother," she whispered back, tears leaking from her galaxy eyes. "He had a laugh like thunder." "Yeah," Elias choked out. "He did." She reached out and touched his face. "You carry so much pain, Elias." "Not anymore," he said, covering her hand. "It is lighter now." The silence in the room was not empty. It was full of the station's hum, a contented purring sound. "We did it," Lyrashai said, a smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We saved the damn station." And, Elias added, closing his eyes with a weary grin, "I think we just accidentally got married in about 12 different star systems." The aftermath was swift and brutal for the conspirators. With the evidence broadcast to every screen in the sector, there was nowhere to hide. Senator Vrax was arrested by his own guards in the council chamber. He spat and cursed, but he was dragged away in irons. The Pale Admiral was intercepted attempting to flee to the Outer Rim. His own crew mutinied when the truth came out. Across the station, and soon across the galaxy, the mood shifted. The anger that had been stoked by the grief orbs turned into a righteous fury against the manipulators. Messages of solidarity flooded the subnet. Human families sent messages to Varelian mothers. Varelian veterans sent apologies to human colonies. It wasn't instant peace, but it was the end of the silence. 3 days later, Lyrashai stood before the Grand Assembly. Elias stood at her side, not behind her, not in the shadows, but right next to the throne. "The law of the bound companion is abolished," Lyrashai announced, her voice ringing clear. "No person is property. No bond is valid without the ongoing, revocable consent of both parties." She turned to Elias. "This man is not my subject," she declared to the galaxy. "He is not my owner. He is my partner. We walk together, or we do not walk at all." The applause was thunderous. It was a sound that shook the foundations of the old world. But the real victory was found in the tabloids. A week later, back in the restored royal suite on Virel, Elias sat up in the bio-bed, holding a holographic magazine. "Listen to this," he laughed, reading the headline. "The Queen and her human scandalously compatible. Experts say their love saved the galaxy. But can he survive her wardrobe?" Lyrashai groaned, pulling a pillow over her head. "Please stop reading." "There is a poll," Elias continued, poking her side. 70% of the populace thinks our psychic merge was romantic. 20% thinks it was terrifying. And 10% wants to know where I got the open-chested tunic. "Burn that tunic," Lyrashai mumbled from under the pillow. "Burn it with plasma." "I don't know," Elias teased. "I think it is growing on me. I might wear it to the next budget meeting." Lyrashai emerged from the pillow, her hair wild and glowing softly. She tackled him, pinning him to the mattress. "If you wear that tunic again," she threatened, hovering over him with a playful smile, "I will have you arrested for crimes against fashion." "Worth it." Elias grinned. She kissed him. It was light, easy, and full of laughter. It was the kiss of two people who had faced the end of the world and decided that Sunday morning was better. That evening, the mood in the suite shifted to something quieter, deeper. The suns had set, and the violet nebula was painting the room in soft shadows. The walls pulsed with a gentle amber rhythm, the heartbeat of the palace, now perfectly in sync with its queen. Laerishai walked to the main doors. She placed her hand on the living panel. It glowed green. Open. "The warrant is rescinded," she said softly, not turning around. "The council has dropped all charges. You are a free man. Elias, you can go back to your own quarters. You can go back to Earth if you wish." She turned to face him. She looked vulnerable, stripping away the armor of the queen to reveal the woman who was afraid to hope. "The door is open now," she said. "You may leave whenever you wish." Elias stood by the window, looking out at the city of glass and light. He thought about his empty apartment on Earth. He thought about the silence of space. He thought about the cold that had lived in his chest for 5 years. He turned and looked at Laerishai. He saw the scars on her ribs. He saw the galaxy in her eyes. He saw the person who had jumped into a reactor core for him. He walked to the door. Laerishai held her breath. Elias stopped at the threshold. He looked out into the corridor, where the guards stood at attention. Then, he looked back at her. He reached out and tapped the panel. Click. The heavy pearl doors slid shut. The deadlock engaged with a solid, final thud. Elias turned the lock manually from the inside. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Laerishai let out a breath that sounded like a sob. She crossed the room in 3 strides and collided with him. They embraced, holding each other with a fierce, desperate strength. It wasn't the embrace of a queen and a captive. It wasn't the embrace of 2 diplomats, but it was the embrace of 2 equals who had looked into the abyss and found a home in each other. "I choose you," Elias whispered into her hair. "Today, tomorrow, every day. And I choose you," she whispered back. "My partner, my equal, my love." They pulled back just enough to look at each other. The lesson they had learned in the mind meld hung between them, that love wasn't a fairy tale of perfect harmony. It was a daily decision. It was the courage to stay when the shadows whispered to run. It was the power to say "I want you" without demanding, and "I will stay" without being forced. They walked to the balcony, hand in hand. Below them, the city of Xylos was alive with light. The biocrystalline towers pulsed with a new energy, a harmony that seemed to sing in the night air. Above them, the stars stretched out endlessly, cold and distant, but no longer lonely. Laerishai raised her hand, her skin glowing with the brilliant, iridescent light of the sovereignty. Elias raised his hand, plain and human and scarred. They clasped their fingers together against the backdrop of the cosmos. The contrast was stark, the alien and the human, the light and the shadow. But as they held on, the palace responded. A soft golden pulse rippled out from the balcony, spreading through the city, up into the atmosphere, and out into the void. It was a signal, a heartbeat, a promise that in a universe of silence, they would never be quiet again. The door was locked, but the future was wide open.